In 1840, the British Empire went to war. Not over gold, not over territory, not over power or pride. They went to war over a plant. And the plant they chose to fight for wasn't even grown in Britain. It grew thousands of miles away in the misty mountains of China. A simple leaf that people steeped in hot water. But here is what makes this almost impossible to believe. The British would spend blood and treasure to force an entire nation to grow this leaf against its will. They would break an empire's laws, poison millions, and create an addiction so powerful that it would reshape the map of Asia forever. All because Britain could not afford to stop drinking tea. For thousands of years, tea was the secret of China. Legend says that in 2737 BC, the Chinese Emperor Shennong was boiling water under a tree when leaves blew into his pot. He drank it, and he discovered something that would change the course of human civilization. Now, is that literally true? Probably not. But what is true is this. By the time the first Europeans ever encountered China, tea had already been drunk for so long that no one could remember a time without it. For centuries, China kept tea to itself. The plant would not grow anywhere else, or so they claimed. Chinese merchants guarded the secrets of cultivation so carefully that no seed, no sapling, no living thing was allowed to leave the country. The punishment for smuggling tea plants out of China was death. This was not paranoia. This was monopoly. By the 1600s, when the first European traders arrived in China, tea had become the most valuable commodity in Asia. A single pound of tea cost more than a pound of gold in London. The Portuguese discovered it first, in the 1500s. The Dutch got a taste in the 1600s, but it was the British, as they always did, who became absolutely, catastrophically obsessed. By 1660, when King Charles II married a Portuguese princess, one of her wedding gifts was tea. The royal bride brought crates of it with her dowry, and when the Queen drank it in public, in the glittering halls of Whitehall Palace, something shifted. Tea became fashionable. Within a generation, no aristocrat worth their title would be caught without a tea ceremony. Drinking tea became a status symbol, a sign that you were wealthy enough, connected enough, sophisticated enough to afford the most expensive drink in the world. By 1700, Britain was shipping in so much tea that Chinese merchants could not grow it fast enough. The demand was insatiable. Britain was pouring money into China to buy tea, mountains of silver, chests of cash. And with every ship that returned laden with Chinese tea, Britain grew slightly poorer. This became an obsession and a problem. You see, the Chinese did not want British goods. They had everything they needed. British wool, Chinese silk was better. British pottery, Chinese porcelain was superior. British weapons, China had its own. The Chinese would only accept one form of payment: silver. And Britain was running out of it. So the British faced a choice. They could stop drinking tea, or they could find another way to pay. They chose a third option. They decided to flood China with a drug. In India, the British grew opium. The East India Company had discovered that they could grow opium poppies in India more cheaply and more abundantly than anywhere else in the world. By the 1700s, they were producing it by the ton. But there was one problem. There was no market for it. No one in Britain wanted Indian opium. Europeans had no use for it. But there was one place on Earth where opium was desperately needed and desperately wanted: China. For centuries, opium had been known in China, used occasionally in medicine in small doses. It was not common. It was not socially acceptable. It was not a recreational drug. But the British East India Company saw opportunity. If they could get Chinese people addicted to opium, they could solve two problems at once. They could create a market for Indian opium, and they could use it as a currency to buy the tea that Britain was so desperately craving. So they smuggled it in. At first, it was illegal. The Chinese government forbade opium. But corruption was rampant, and British merchants had infinite patience and infinite capital. They bribed officials. They worked with smugglers. They found loopholes. And slowly, opium addiction spread through China like a plague. By the 1750s, opium was flowing into China by the ton. By the 1800s, millions of Chinese were addicted. The addiction was systematic, deliberate, and catastrophically successful. Britain was now selling more opium to China than China was selling tea to Britain. The balance had reversed. China was now the one losing silver. China was now the one bleeding wealth. And China's rulers were watching their population descend into addiction and degradation. The Qing dynasty realized what was happening. In 1838, the emperor sent a commissioner named Lin Zexu to shut it down. Lin was tasked with one mission: stop the opium trade or die trying. And Lin Zexu did something that would change everything. He attacked. In 1839, Lin Zexu's forces confiscated over 20,000 chests of opium from British warehouses in Canton. They destroyed it. They burned it. They were going to end this. The British response was swift and merciless. Britain declared war on China for the right to sell opium. The First Opium War lasted from 1840 to 1842. It was catastrophically one-sided. Chinese soldiers with swords and spears faced British soldiers with rifles and cannons and warships equipped with naval artillery. The Chinese had no chance. China lost, completely, utterly, devastatingly. And the British demands were extraordinary. The Treaty of Nanking, signed in 1842, forced China to 1. Open 5 ports to British trade. 2. Cede the island of Hong Kong to Britain permanently. 3. Pay a massive indemnity to Britain for the cost of the war that Britain started. And 4. Most insultingly, legalize the opium trade. China was forced by military defeat to allow the British to flood its population with opium. After the war, opium addiction in China exploded. Millions more became addicted. The social fabric of Chinese society was torn apart. Families were destroyed. Productivity collapsed. The very foundation of the Qing dynasty began to crack. And throughout all of this, as China suffered, Britain prospered. With the opium trade legalized, the British could now use opium to pay for Chinese tea without spending silver. They would grow opium in India, ship it to China, trade it for tea, and ship the tea back to Britain. The cycle was complete. The system was self-sustaining, and it was hideously profitable. Between 1842 and 1900, opium addiction in China grew from a few million addicts to tens of millions, all so Britain could afford to drink tea. But there was one problem with the British addiction to Chinese tea. China still grew all of it. Britain was dependent, vulnerable, enslaved to Chinese supply. So the British did what they always did. In the 1840s, as Britain was forcing China to legalize opium, they were simultaneously running a secret operation to steal tea plants from China and transplant them to India. A Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune was hired by the British government to do something that, if discovered, would result in his execution. He was to sneak into China, disguise himself as a Chinese merchant, infiltrate the tea plantations, and steal both the seeds and the living plants of the most valuable crop in the world. Fortune succeeded. Over multiple missions between 1843 and 1846, he smuggled thousands of tea plants out of China. He studied their cultivation, he learned the secrets, and he brought everything back to India. At first, the tea grown in India was inferior to Chinese tea, but the British would not be deterred. They sent more scientists, they refined the cultivation. They experimented with different altitudes and climates, and by the 1860s, they had figured it out. India began producing tea. And not just producing it cheaper than China ever could. The tea plantations of India became vast industrial operations. Hundreds of thousands of workers, many of them essentially enslaved, or in conditions barely better than slavery, labored to grow tea for the British market. The British had stolen the Chinese monopoly. They had moved tea production to a place where they could control it, exploit it, and profit from it absolutely. By 1880, India was producing more tea than China. By 1900, British India was the world's largest tea supplier. And China's tea monopoly, a monopoly that had lasted for thousands of years, was shattered. Think about what happened here. A plant that China guarded for millennia. A monopoly so complete that the Chinese risked death to protect it. An economic stranglehold that lasted longer than most empires. And it was destroyed not by superior Chinese strategy, but by British ruthlessness and industrial might. The British did not just steal a plant. They stole an entire economy. They forced a nation into drug addiction to pay for tea. They rewrote the rules of global trade through military conquest. And they built one of history's largest economic empires on the backs of Indian laborers, producing the very product that China had once held sacred. And today, when you drink a cup of tea, you are tasting the result of this history. The tea in your cup is likely grown in India or Kenya or Sri Lanka, countries where British colonial power established tea plantations that still operate today, still export tea to Britain and the world, still perpetuate the systems of labor and control that were born from this theft and this violence. The leaf that was once worth more than gold, guarded by an empire and capable of starting wars, that leaf is now so abundant, so cheap, so ubiquitous that we drink it without thinking. But every cup tells a story. The story of an obsession, the story of a monopoly broken, the story of millions addicted to opium so that Britain could afford its daily ritual, the story of a colonial power that would stop at nothing, not even poisoning an entire nation, to get what it wanted. The powerful were not afraid of tea itself. They were afraid of what happened when an entire nation could not live without it. They were afraid of dependence. They were afraid of monopoly. And when they could not break China's monopoly through force of will, they broke it through force of arms. And in doing so, they revealed the true nature of empire, not the conquest of nations, but the conquest of desire. If this shocked you, subscribe. We uncover the hidden history behind something in your kitchen every single week.